The 7 opposition political parties in Kempton Park have agreed to call the pact that comes out of their deliberations the multi-party charter for South Africa. This was announced by facilitator of the two-day talks, Professor William Gumede. Obviously, we just heard from him. He says that the engagements amongst the parties are robust with details of a vision they have agreed to be communicated later. Now, SABC News reporter Natasha Phiri is live for us from Kempton Park and joins us. Natasha, good afternoon. If you can hear me, perhaps you could give us a wrap of the general sentiments from the leaders of the 7 parties and whether they're confident that this is going to work.
Well, Liesl, earlier on we heard them giving that press briefing and speaking and engaging to members of the media earlier on, where you saw the Professor Gumede also was also speaking to us. And the general consensus amongst these political parties, these 7 political parties, is that they should put aside their differences, they should put aside their egos and work together for the greater good of all South Africans, more especially if they want to see this multi-party charter for South Africa actually move on. Like I've just indicated, 7 political parties have agreed, to form a pact, and this pact will be, again, I'll repeat that name, the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa. We also heard that before we went on lunch from Professor Gumede, who's actually facilitating this process, that all parties have agreed to a common vision, but of course he will be announcing that later on. This is something that all political parties actually need to sign on paper. He did, however, indicate, which was quite interesting, the issue that they had robust engagements with these political parties. Liesl, you would remember that, these are 7 different political parties with 7 different ideologies and various constituencies. So I'm telling you, it's not easy. What we're hearing is that those discussions are actually not easy behind closed doors, because you also understand that certain political parties will also have to, sacrifice certain things, and that also requires political majority so that they could come together, indeed, if they want to see this gain fruition and if they want to be a success come next year's poll. And remember, they also said that their common vision, yes, as much as they want to dethrone the ANC government, they want to make sure that this is something, this vision, this pact is something that South Africans actually want, and it's not about them. And quite testament or evident in this is that they had asked members of the public and several civil society groups to actually comment and give their expectations of what they expect this multi-party democracy charter to comprise of. And if I'll just read you some of the inputs that have been made, I'm looking at an input that was made by the Institute of Race Relations here, and some of the inputs that they made to this pact is that they want South Africa to increase direct investment. You would know that we live in a country where unemployment rate is quite high. You've got about 70% of our youth which are unemployed. Other inputs that they made is to maintain and expand infrastructure in our country, which is also a huge issue, Liesl. Another input that they made is to draw millions of people into the labor market, and another input is to broaden and speed up economic participation. So this is not just the only group that had made inputs. Ordinary members of society were requested to, and other civil society organizations were requested to make their inputs to make sure and to ensure that it's not about politics of these 7 political parties like the DA, like the IFP, Action SA, UIM, SNP, and Isanko. But, Liesl, it is those inputs that come in from ordinary South Africans. And just to take you through the sentiments of some South Africans, some have lauded this process, saying that, listen, this is a process that hasn't happened, since the dawn of democracy. You would remember, just to give a bit of context and background, that over 30 years ago, people met at this very venue to form the Codeса negotiations. And now, 30 years, almost after 30 years down the line, these negotiations are taking place. So some people have labeled this as first of its kind in the history of South Africa, where you have opposition parties coming together for what they call the greater good of all South Africans, to ensure that, listen, a new government, a multi-party government, may somewhat actually take over post the 2024 elections. But, Liesl, this is only if the ANC will dip below 50%.
Natasha, where to from here now that the multi-party charter for South Africa has been launched? How will they all campaign individually, perhaps also promoting this new conglomerate of sorts? Walk us through what's expected from here too.
I think that's an interesting question, Liesel, and this is how then these parties, leaders of these parties, must then, deliberate on. I'd asked the question to the professor earlier on that will they come under one banner? It's still unclear right now, but what we do know that is that vision for this group has actually been crafted. We are yet to know and find out what that vision entails and whether or not, this pact is actually binding or not. Because remember, I earlier said to you that this is a group of 7 different political parties, different ideologies, different constituencies. So let's just say, for an example, a case in point, if you and I are part of this pact, and I feel like somewhere down the line, Liesel, it's not working for me, what mechanism do we ensure that these parties don't actually leave this pact, or can I just walk away from it? So these are some of the questions that we'll be posing as members of the media as to how does this pact actually work out?
No, absolutely, Natasha. Perhaps also, is it equal representation? Does one take the lead? Pertinent questions, but thank you for that update.